Hi, today's chapter focuses on stress and organizational stress in particular. So, what we're going to look at in this chapter is what stress is, what the causes of stress are, different models of stress, how we react to stress, workplace stressors, and we'll conclude with how to manage stress or what are some ways forward. It's a particularly timely topic because, first of all, we're nearing the end of term, so that is always stressful when exam time comes up. And also, if we look at it in terms of workplace stress, and we see that 25% of employees view their jobs as the number one stressor in their lives, and 75% of employees who were interviewed view their jobs now as more stressful than they were a decade ago. So, as I say, it is a timely topic. So, what is stress? Stress is different for everyone, and what is stressful for one person might not be stressful for another. But overall, it's an adaptive response that we have that can be emotional, behavioral, or physiological to a situation that we see as challenging or threatening to our well-being. So there are different kinds of stress. There can be good stress as well as bad stress. And good stress leads to healthy and positive outcomes, but it's the negative or bad stress that we usually focus on because of the consequences that are there. So what are some examples of good stress that you can think of? I'll give you pause for a moment to fill in the blanks there. But an example of good stress could be starting a new job. It could be performance in a sporting event. You're going forward, so you're stressed, but it's not a bad stress. But you do have some stress, some physiological, emotional, or behavioral response to that, and that's a good thing. So, as I say, there can be stressful factors in both terms, but it's usually the negative ones that we focus on. So what causes our stress? I've just given you some examples of good stress, but stressors are demands made on us, and that's what we refer to them as stressors, that cause this response. And as I said, not everyone has the same reaction to the same situation. Something that is stressful for one person might not be stressful for another. Our response to stress is affected by our personality, by the perceptions we have of the situation. It can be affected by change in our lives, change in the workplace, change at home, or a crisis that we experience. But different perceptions are affected by different concepts that I'll go through briefly here. The first is what we call self-efficacy. And these perceptions, and this is a perceptual event, in fact, whether or not we believe that we can accomplish something that we set out to do. Do we have a high self-efficacy? Do we believe we can do something? Or do we have a low self-efficacy? And obviously, if we have low self-efficacy, that will tend to cause us more stress if we're faced with a situation where we have to do something different or we don't think we can do the job. Similarly, but different, is our locus of control, the degree of control we have over a situation. Do we have an internal locus of control where we believe we have control, or do we believe that someone else controls the situation? If we believe we have control, then our sense of stress might be lower when faced with a situation, and likewise higher if we feel we have no control over the situation. Are we in a negative mood? Do we have negative affectivity? That can affect our level of stress. Do we have a type A or a type B personality type? Are we a type A where we have certain traits that could lead us more to experience stress as a stressor, or we are more easygoing and therefore things don't stress us as much? What experience do we have with the situation or the event? That will affect how we perceive what we're seeing. What education or training do we have? Is it something we feel we can do, that we know we can do because we've been trained for it, or is it something entirely new which can cause us stress? So for example, with Brightspace, which I'm talking to you on now, when it was switched over from Blackboard, I had to have new training on it. So this was stressful because it was something that I hadn't done before, but with the training, I felt more confident most of the time because I felt that I could deal with the situation. Is there support there for us? Do we feel we're doing something on our own, or do we have social networks that can support us? And do we have different thresholds in our reaction to resisting the stressor? What kind of reaction do we have, or what levels of resistance do we have? So there is a model that relates to that, the general adaptation syndrome, and you'll see that in your PowerPoints, and it shows you the different stages of reacting to stress and the normal levels of resistance we have and how we react to it. And there's a figure that gives you the types of responses. So you should be familiar with that, and you should know the different levels. You should also be familiar with the various perspectives of stress. How is stress viewed? How is stress studied? Is stress a reaction to an event or situation? In this case, we would be focusing on the response to the event. Is it a reaction? How do we respond? What is the physiological response? The general adaptation syndrome would fit into there. Non-specific responses, same for every stressor. This approach doesn't recognize the psychological implications of different stressors and how they result in different outcomes. So that's one warning on that one. Or do we focus on the stressor itself, stress as an event? Or do we look at stress as an interaction between the two? So I'll just give you a personal example here. If I don't like to fly, I'm a very fair weather flyer. And I do a lot of it. So if we looked at my response as stress as a reaction, we would look at my physiological responses and study stress from that point of view. How do I respond to stress? What are my physiological symptoms? Where is my level of resistance? How do I react to it? If we looked at stress as an event, we would focus on the stressor and say, okay, what is the stressor? Dislike of flying. Let's focus on the dislike of flying as the stressor and look and see how it varies from individual to individual. Some people love to fly, some people don't. So what is it that makes this a stressor? So that would be the focus there. Whereas the interaction would look at the relation between the individual and the event and look at the different perceptual factors that we have there and how they're interrelated. So those are the different ways that we can view stress, perspectives of stress. Stress and personality, I touched on. How does your personality impact on your reactions to stress, your physiological reactions to this, and the reactions to the stressor itself? And there's a section in there to explain that, in the PowerPoints that is. Workplace stressors. Okay, what are workplace stressors? As I said, it's a very important, stress in the workplace is a very important concept to consider. Well, first of all, there are factors that are intrinsic to the job, that are part of the job that can cause us stress. Working conditions, such as shift work, maybe working outdoors in bad weather, the type of technologies that are in place. Are they up to date? Are they not up to date? Shift work, work overload. Is there too much work? That's a common stressor. And the culture of the organization. How does the culture of the organization, or the way things are done, impact on stress levels? It might be something that is entirely contradictory to your set of values or beliefs, in which case that would be a stressful situation. Culture is something you'll talk about in Macro OB. If you've taken that already, you'll understand how that will work in. So that's factors intrinsic to the job. Second of workplace stressors are role-related stressors. Is the role clear Again, what is the workload? What kind of work are you doing? How much control do you have over your job? Do you have autonomy in what you're doing? And what kind of role conflict, if it happens to be the case, exists in the workplace? And how is that a stressor? Do you have competing roles? Are you getting contradictory messages on how you're supposed to do the job? Maybe you're reporting to two different people and you're getting contradictory messages. Maybe the roles you do compete, or as I said, in terms of culture as well, but this can weigh in on role conflict. Are your values compatible with the job that you're doing? If they're not, then you're going to have a stressful situation. Interpersonal stressors are the third type of workplace stressor. Workplace bullying, sexual harassment, hostile work environment, all these weigh in. And workplace stressors can also be non-work factors. Work-family balance. How do you balance your time between work and family? Time-based conflict due to work scheduling, commuting, traveling, doing work at home. So time-based conflict. How do you not only balance work-family, but how do you balance your chores? Work stress affects home and vice versa. So strain-based conflict and role behavior. So inter-role conflict. You might have one role in the workplace and you come home and you have a different role. How do you balance those and pave the way for both to work? So those are 4 sets of workplace stressors that are important to look at. I do give a list of the most stressful jobs for 2015 from Forbes magazine. It would be interesting to get a more updated list. So if you have one or you have new facts and figures for this chapter, please feel free to send them to me. Okay, I'd be looking forward to getting those. Consequences of stress. So what happens when you experience stress? You've seen the factors, you've seen what influences whether you have stress, and you've seen how you study stress, but what are the consequences of it? Physiologically, we have illness. Illness is a big outcome of stress. Behavioral consequences, irritability, and organizational consequences, which is what we're interested in this course. Stress can lead to such concrete things as increased absenteeism, turnover in the workplace. If you're stressed and you're not happy, you might actually leave the job and look for work elsewhere if you're able to, or lower levels of productivity overall because you are stressed, you are not carrying on. A psychological outcome of stress, and one that's quite common, especially in particular categories of jobs, is job burnout. This can be caused by interpersonal and role-related stressors, both. And the symptoms are emotional exhaustion, lack of energy, cynicism, depersonalization, and reduced feelings of accomplishments. So those are talked about as well. I'm going through this rather quickly just to give you an overview, so bear with me. So we're up to how do you manage workplace stress? Well, removing the stressor, if that's possible, as an individual, that is. Withdrawing from the stressor, providing more training and education, having more training and education, controlling the consequences. A lot of workplaces have wellness programs, exercise facilities. Using social support networks is really important. A lot of workplaces as well have employee assistance programs and experience with the stressor. So these all tie back to some of the causes that we looked at in the beginning, looking at those causes and answering how we deal with them. I've given you some examples of work-life balance and some criticisms of management approaches to stress. For example, questions to think about. Do organizations only offer partial solutions in dealing with stress? And whose responsibility is it to manage stress? Is it at the organizational level or is it at the individual level? So I have them down as criticisms, but they're questions and concerns as well. So, brief overview of the chapter, look at the PowerPoints, and have fun with the exercise in doing it and looking for ways forward and being creative, and have a good week.